I would never have come back to America if you had invited me to the liberal churches. Where do we become like the world to win the world? When did the church decide to do that? You cannot win the world by being like the world. The world will win you the day you start that.
What went wrong with you? Does freedom of speech mean you can defile my children and a whole generation? Wait, sir. Wait till that generation is grown up. You won't know how to walk out of your front door without fearing for your life, because what you sow, you reap.
The blaspheme, the filth, the depravity, this young fellow telling the children to rise up and stab their fathers to death or to commit suicide. What happened to the governments of the world? I'd like to ask you, when did you become so weak? When I was young, we'd put people like that into a mental home or a jail. Today, we're too scared because money speaks. So we don't mind a whole generation being defiled by the most immoral young man alive. You don't only sow it individually, you want to sow nationally perversion, you reap perverts. I guarantee you that what the devil has taken 50 years to do in this land, in bringing demoralizing things, in undermining integrity and decency, in defiling your land, so that your land faces judgment. I guarantee you that what the devil has taken 50 years to do, we could undo in a few days as the people of God on our knees in prayer. But do you honestly believe, or is it just a statement that stirs you but won't motivate you into warfare? Will you wake up when your country is totally destroyed, America?
I want you to notice that we are commanded to put on the whole armor of God for protection before we enter into warfare on our knees in prayer. For we place ourselves on the front line of the battle between God and Satan the moment we get on our knees. We dare not sit back any longer as the Church of Jesus Christ and allow the devil to destroy this land of yours. We have weapons. And the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. There is no stronghold the devil has that we cannot pull down through prayer.
Can you pray without a condemned heart, beloved?
The eyes of the Lord are over the righteous. His ears are open unto their prayers.
But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil.
The effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much.
God is seeking. I sought for a man. God said of a whole generation, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro seeking. Is there someone whose heart is right, who can lift up holy hands? I sought for a man that could make up the gap, stand in the gap. As he's looking across America right now, with what the devil seems to have the right to do, I found none, God says. Nothing was meant for history. Nothing was meant for nice stories to tell children. Everything was meant to reach your heart. Every word weighed in the balance of the Old Testament, from Genesis 1 right through.
If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray, was said in the Old Testament to Israel. That's its context. But there was not one verse in the Old Testament God didn't have in mind for you and me to tell us his heart. People of God, that promise was meant with you in mind when God gave it, because it's the word of God. If my people in this land, now in the gospel dispensation, who are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways, from their sins, confess their sins and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and will heal their land.
I have often been amused at the testimonies of men who had no idea of the power of prayer until they prayed a burdened prayer in desperation against the devil.
Christians are not aggressive. We're not called to be militant like these other people who think they're serving God and say they're doing it for Allah by bombing people and bombing buildings. Don't get me wrong, that's not Christianity. Beloved, we don't hurt anyone physically. We don't. We're not called to do that.
to get our way. But the moral side, so that those souls can be saved, is nothing God won't do. We need to get into warfare to do it. Leave the religions of the other world to say they serve God by bombing up people. Oh, and if any of you of that other religion are listening to me, get out of that religion. Use your brains. It's deranged. How can you believe it's God to put a bomb on a child's body and say you can be a suicidal bomb and you're serving Allah by killing other people? Just use yourself. Turn from that and turn to Jesus first. And I watched the children looking, and their mothers and fathers trying to pull their eyes off, and they're looking, and I thought, no. You defile a child bringing your child to America. You defile your child bringing your child to New York, the greatest city in the world. How do you honestly believe the seeds the devil is going to sow in your heart? I said, God, I can't bring my children here. The devil will put things in their mind. There'll be no ending to the repercussions. And I began to weep, but I began to weep louder than I thought I was weeping. I wept so loud that I was standing there sobbing. I sobbed so loud. I was broken. I was so devastated at what America was doing. And I lifted my hands up, and I shouted. I didn't know I was shouting. I wasn't trying to be fanatical. I shouted. I cried so loud to God in my devastation, in my anger, that I couldn't bring my children to the city without defiling them. I cried out, God, oh God, do anything but close these buildings down, God. Close these buildings down, God. Do anything but close them down. In Jesus Christ's name I wept, and I suddenly wiped the tears from my eyes. A few hundred people were standing still. I would say a few hundred, could be 500, had stopped close to me, just all looking. A deathly silence all around me. And brother, sister, I looked at their faces, most of them, tears were coming down their faces. They'd never in their life seen a man weep over defilement in this generation. They'd never ever seen a man hurting and broken and smashed and crushed to weep and cry to God in devastation as I was. And I looked at face upon face, tears. They couldn't move as they heard clearly what I was crying, and they knew what I was praying about. Let me tell you something, Christians of America. There is nothing God will not do for you for this land to be healed. If you get right with God and you begin to pray on your knees, the only army that will ever save America from what the devil is trying to do to her is the army of God's people on their knees. That if you get right with God, if you begin to seek God, America's Christians, stop fighting my doctrine or my standards, sir. You won't have a land to be even liberal in your church later. You better get right with God. And do what your heart tells you. Seek God for righteousness. Get back to this book. If my people who are called by my name in America, I believe you say it's out of its context. I'm beginning to say it's in its context. It's what God holds out to any land. Don't wait for the politicians to become righteous. It's the church. I don't blame the politicians. I blame the church for what state your country's in. You should be on your knees, and you should be in war, and you could undo anything the devil's done, but you're listening more to the television news than you are on your knees. You're sitting there watching in hopelessness and unbelief and criticizing the government, and it's our fault. It's my people God's waiting for. To get down before God. Don't worry about the news anymore. Get down before God. You know enough to know you need to get down before God. I'll tell you something. Wait for politicians to deal with the problem, and you won't have a country left. And further field, you won't have a world left just now, Christian. You better get to war with the weapons God's given you. While you have a moment left to do it, you'd better do it. You'd better do it.